Okay, this video is the final video on macroeconomic policies, the third of those policies being supply side. It's Unit 3.7. As we did with fiscal and monetary, we start with a list of the goals of supply side, and again, they're very much related to the objectives of the macroeconomy. You'll see here, though, that there's a little bit more of an emphasis on production, productive capacity, productivity, efficiency, competition, and encouraging markets to work in a more flexible, competitive way to provide incentives. It's much more of a free market approach, a new classical approach to managing the economy, very different to the Keynesian sort of demand side. Supply side policies are divided into two categories. One is called an interventionist. The government plays a key role in the interventionist supply side policies, and the other is called market-based, which is focused on allowing markets to work more freely to encourage people to work and for firms to invest. When we talk about interventionist supply side policies, we are still looking at increases in potential output, and in a sense, these supply side policies are encouraged by sort of Keynesian type economists, and they will have impacts on aggregate demand. As we'll see, there are demand side impacts of supply side policies. The various categories are to invest in human capital, education, quantity and quality of healthcare, technology, research and development, grants, for example, might be given, infrastructure, basic infrastructure in the road network or utilities in general, various industrial policies, again, to try and encourage competition in markets. Market-based policies, though, are slightly different in that they take the view of encouraging incentives, primarily competition in general, and they're divided into three sort of sections. There we've got the policies that really focus on competition, like deregulation of markets, anti-monopoly, privatization, trade liberalization, like free trade. Theory of comparative advantage comes in there for higher level students. Labour market reforms, again, improving the competitiveness of labour markets, so reduce trade union power, unemployment benefits to incentivise people to take jobs, ending the minimum wage. So you can immediately see that there potentially are some sort of equity or equality issues with regards to labour market reforms. The sort of suggestion that reducing unemployment benefits will encourage people to work, as we'll see in a moment, relies on the assumption that there is work available for these people to do. And in a sense, they're choosing not to because the unemployment benefits are perhaps too high. So you've got to be very careful with that as a policymaker. Various other incentive-based policies revolve around taxes and the level of tax that, particularly in a progressive tax system, is thought to provide a disincentive if it's too high for people to work or firms to invest and produce. Here's that list written in another way, exactly the same as the previous slide. So look, if we were to just take a look at this issue of unemployment benefit, if you had a question about the effectiveness of market-based policies, you were talking about labour market reforms, reducing unemployment benefit, you'd explain in your one paragraph, using real-world examples probably, but the point of it is to try and make markets more competitive. It's a labour market. So you wanted to remove all of the elements of that labour market that make it uncompetitive. So getting rid of the unemployment benefit would be one of those factors which will then incentivise people to find work, to no longer remain unemployed, or they'll be working, and particularly perhaps the frictionally unemployed, leading to an increase in output and a shift in the long-run aggregate supply curve. Your discussion, though, could be quite varied, actually. It's by no means limited by what's written here. But things that you might sort of point out are the actual size of the reduction in benefits. Does it make a significant difference? If it is significant, there's more of an incentive for perhaps people to find work. But as I said earlier, even here, there needs to be work available for people to take. If benefits fall, but the demand for labour is still low, it doesn't necessarily have the impact that you want it to have. In fact, it could lead to detrimental impacts in terms of the quality of income, and low earners now will be even more sort of precariously placed with regards to their financial position. And the time frame, like all of these things, and the relatively standard criticism of supply side is the time that it takes for these policies to come into effect. It's not going to happen overnight, and it may take years before you see some benefit. And that places governments at a certain under pressure because they are looking for immediate results. They want to be seen to be doing something. In a way, fiscal and monetary policies are far more attractive to them because you can see the impact relatively quickly. Here with supply side, they might have to wait years, and voters don't often give them that waiting time. The sort of classic diagram is the classical view, shifting long-run aggregate supply to LRAS2. What you see, the appeal of it is fairly obvious. What you get is this shift here, a higher level of real output, RGDP, coupled with potentially less pressure on prices, leads to quite obvious benefits of effective supply-side policies. The Keynesian view, though, even if you are looking at the effectiveness type question, just shifting your long-run aggregate supply curve for a Keynesian perspective, if your level of aggregate demand is relatively low, is not going to lead to an increase in actual output. It might lead to an increase in your potential, but as Keynes pointed out, it's the actual output that really employs people and makes a difference to people's lives. And just having the potential doesn't necessarily mean that will be fulfilled, and you might still remain in equilibrium as an economy at this lower level of income, because that whole chicken and the egg, what comes first, supply or demand question arises. Now, here's a slide that just looks at the reality of supply side effects of fiscal policies. We can definitely see that when governments change spending or taxation, like those as a fiscal policy, it will have supply side effects. There's an overlap, isn't there? You start talking about changing the progressive tax system. We were just referring to that as a fiscal policy, but now it's both fiscal and monetary impacts. But also there's going to be demand side effects of supply side policies, in particular the interventionist supply side policies. If you are going to invest in a new road or rail network, that's a significant fiscal boost to the economy on the aggregate demand side, and the supply side impacts may well be also forthcoming, but not perhaps as immediately as the demand side effects. So when you talk about the effectiveness of supply side policies, again, here's our constraints, both for market-based and interventionist. The limitations of the policies are those equity issues, time lags come into it all the time. And for interventionists as well, it's the cost of these projects are often quite prohibitively expensive. And the strengths are in terms of making markets more competitive, and the government budget is not adversely affected. Interventionist, you can support different sectors in the economy, really focus on infrastructure that can benefit all of your industry. So that can be quite beneficial from that perspective. Okay.